genitas, meam medet rudit simplicitas.
Hi, this is Chris.
And this is Elam.
And this is Infobores.
You know, dear listener, fun fact about today, I would say that this is perhaps a day of general honesty, without example in the world's history, though the fumes are not of a singular authority, and indeed are dry as poverty. Don't you agree, Chris, my co-host?
Sure, Elam. What's that you're reading?
I'm reading Some Trees, a poetry collection by beloved American poet and member of the New York School, John Ashbery.
So you're reading us poetry by a guy named John Ashbery. Who is John Ashbery? Or who was John Ashbery?
I gave the description. It's like he's a poet, member of the New York School. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward.
That doesn't tell us a lot. I lived in Manhattan. I knew a lot of people went to school in New York.
No, New York School, it was a collection of poets. He was with Frank O'Hara, James Schuyler, Barbara Guest, and
let me guess.
Kenneth Koch.
So are these just people who didn't have jobs and lived in New York City together?
No, they often had jobs. I think, for example, Frank O'Hara was...
I thought you said they were poets.
Yeah, they were poets, but Frank O'Hara, his initial day job, I don't know if you ever could, I don't think he did, was he was working at the MoMA. He was working at the MoMA as like...
Fun fact, I actually lived in Manhattan. As I said, I used to work at Lincoln Center, Avery Fisher Hall.
Did you ever meet Mr. Lincoln?
No, but I did have people come and look at the label on my lapel that said Avery Fisher Hall, and they'd like, "Are you Mr. Hall?" I'm like, wow.
That is a funny joke.
Yeah,
I'm
upscale
glad.
clientele.
It's good that you heard it so many times, because I bet it just got funnier each time.
Yeah. Did you notice what was common with the poets? None of them were actually making any money from being poets, right?
That's not true of them all.
Okay,
I think
yeah,
John Ashbery
made a lot of money from being a poet?
I think he made probably a respectable bag, I'd say. I don't know, though.
You think he made enough to actually pay back college debt?
Oh, definitely. I mean, he won. Here's a fun fact for our listeners about John Ashbery. He's the only poet to get the 3 biggest poetry awards for the same book. His book, Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror, got the Pulitzer, the National Book Award, and the third one I'm forgetting the name of.
I dare not guess, because I would get it wrong. So this is like winning the triple stakes? Or what do they call that? What do they call it?
Triple Crown?
The Triple Crown. I think triple
stakes. Yeah, John Ashbery is the most respected horse/poet out there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, he was the Queen's favorite poet, wasn't he? No, that was Dick Francis, and he was a writer about stories involving horses or something.
Wait, actually, I think I can actually find the name to the book I was talking about. Oh, yeah, it was the National... This is why I got tripped up. There's the National Book Award, and then there's the National Book Critics Circle Award. Come on. Be a bit more inventive with your names.
Everybody knows. So, what did he do for a real job?
I actually don't know. I've never cared about his biography. It's not that relevant to his poetry, usually.
Well, look in the back book of the book jacket. I bet it tells you... No, on the book jacket here.
No, it doesn't say anything on the book jacket.
It doesn't tell you anything about the weather. Okay, well, we're off topic.
No, there's a biography in the back of the book, though. So, listener, if you'll just give me a moment, we can actually find this out for you.
Well, I just saw something that said Richard dies of leukemia.
That's his brother, and he actually did write poems about that later in life. But,
I see. His brother died in 1940.
That's interesting.
Sad.
John became a finalist in 1941 in National Quiz Kids radio competition.
During World War II.
Here's another thing. Apparently, the start of his lifelong interest in classical music is, quote, seeing Walt Disney's Fantasia.
Oh, yeah. Who didn't see Walt Disney Fantasia?
I watched it as a kid. Although I always preferred Fantasia 2000.
Yeah. You know, to be honest, I did too. The Donald Duck part, I think, is my favorite. All
right, hold on. Fantasia's the better movie.
I don't know. The George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue section was pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah,
there were several great parts in the remake. Was that 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the year you were born, but I remember seeing that in the IMAX theater, and it was pretty stinking amazing.
Wait, I'm finding out new information about one of my favorite poets. Apparently, he played the leading role in Rudy Burkhart's film Mounting Tension. He also
Okay.
he also wrote a play titled Everyman, A Mask.
Okay, so why are we... Well, tell us when he died. That's probably the more interesting part.
He died in 2020, I think.
Just like a couple years, few years ago?
He was around for a long time.
What was he doing? Well, probably
was still
nursing
writing.
around a nursing home.
He was still writing poetry. He had published a book just that year, and he was doing readings on Zoom for it.
Now, listeners, I don't know if you knew this, but Elam here is a poet, and his interest is in poetry.
No, we don't have to put such fancy labels on it. I'm unemployed is the actual term.
and struggling with the idea that eventually he's going to be a barista somewhere. But
I disagree.
If you're fortunate. Okay. All right. Anyways, there's a reason why you introduced us to John Ashbery today. Why
Yes.
is that?
So today, now, Chris, you have been reading a little bit of John Ashbery, correct?
I have been reading a little bit of John Ashbery at your suggestion.
And how would you describe your experience of John Ashbery thus far? Like in terms of readability, enjoyability, etc.
Enjoyable, not very readable, a little confusing at times, but yet strangely compelling.
Strangely compelling. An excellent description.
Is that what that means? The normal person's? I mean,
I'm
I'm the guy here on the team who has the average intelligence, who really doesn't get it a lot, and so I'm sitting there just looking at this and thinking, what's this about? But on the other hand,
The average person...
the words are kind of good.
The average person often does bounce off Ashbery. But it's not, to my mind, it's not because Ashbery is more elusive or more complicated than the average poet. Like, if you compare it to, say, Ezra Pound, he's not constantly engaging in historical references past the late
I
reader.
must admit, I don't usually pick up Ezra Pound for light reading before I go to sleep either.
Exactly. But John Ashbery, the complexity is a very pure-hearted one, because he's just constantly leaping around and you can't get hold of him. He's like a hyperactive kid. And you're trying to tackle him.
You mean like
and put him in jail?
It's one of those kids with ADHD, or some other, whatever they call it now,
Just
where
moving around.
just
And
moving
lots of thoughts.
lots of thoughts that don't seem to be connected, that just randomly go from
That's
one
the
to
thing. Much like those kids, the thoughts are connected,
Okay,
but we're not always privy to how. However,
Thank you.
Dear
That sounds like
listener.
Freud again.
dear listener, this is a once in an episode opportunity in which you will be able to hear us two together explain and identify a John Ashbery poem to you.
Oh, that's exciting. Hey, that makes me think that though you and I should sometime have a call-in program.
No.
Yeah, no, come on. Wouldn't that be fun? We could do a live recording.
I don't give
What's
free...
a live recording? Aren't all recordings live?
Listen, I don't give free exposure.
Free exposure to any kind of radical who writes in. Good grief, the radicals are behind the mic. All right. So, what is it you and I are doing with this
We are
Ashbery?
going to be reading the poem Eclogue from his collection Some Trees.
Just so you know, that's ack, not ick. Ick is I-C-K. It means that you have disgusted. Yuck, it's gross. This is eclogue. E-C-L-O-G-U-E. Interesting last word, too. It comes from the Greek, logos, which means word, matter, thing, or
What does
subject.
the ek mean?
Well, usually it's from the X, out of, or from. If it does have its roots in the Greek, so you probably put those together, the preposition ek or x. Ek, actually, ek, out of or from, yeah, with log.
Well, I can give a little context to this poem before we
Interesting.
start getting deep into it.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a little bit of context one needs in order to understand it. This is a poem titled an eclogue, and it is in the form of an eclogue. The eclogue was a form, I think, maybe created by Virgil, though I think he was indebted to some other poets.
Oh, I saw that Virgil had written eclogue.
Yeah, he wrote a book titled Eclogues.
Okay.
But the form of the eclogue is essentially a bunch of shepherds either providing monologues or dialogues about philosophical issues. And
Sorry, what? Well, there isn't a lot to do out here with these sheep. So, hey, what do you know? What do you think beauty is?
I've met many people who consider eclogues the most boring of the poetry genres.
You mean the Virgil's?
No, because the eclogue, and this is an important part
Wait,
of the
does it always
context,
have to be a shepherd?
It's always shepherds. It's about nature and the philosophy of rural versus urban life. It's at the start of.
That's classic.
I mean, Virgil, he's writing from the start of considering what it means for there to be a central city where people are close together, as opposed to the rural areas.
Is this part of the I'm not to leap off the topic, but is this anything that led into the 1800s love of the pastoral and romanticism, where they were deciding to get away from the Industrial Revolution?
Well, yeah, they'd often reference Virgil and those kind of writers. And indeed, this poem in specific isn't even talking to Virgil, but is instead a reference to Edmund Spenser, who's writing on the example of Virgil. The dialogue.
So now we're back to the Fairy Queen.
Yeah. The dialogue in this poem is between two characters named Cuddy and Colin Clout. Now, Colin Clout is actually...
Wait, is that the last name of both of them, Cuddy and Colin?
No, they're not related, which is a thing that if you don't know going in advance, the poem trips you up because one of them seemingly refers to the other as father. We can talk about that later, though.
Okay.
So, Cuddy, Colin Clout, not related, but Colin Clout is actually the stand-in for the author in Spenser's poems. Whenever he wants a character that is essentially just himself, he puts in Colin Clout.
It's Edward Spenser, Fairy Queen guy, when he wanted to insert himself into a poem, he would call himself Cuddy?
No, Colin Clout.
He was Colin Clout.
Colin Clout, exactly.
Wait, what's he? Hey, boy, all kinds of jokes about, the clout, having clout. Okay, never mind.
Well, he wanted the clout. That's absolutely true. He wrote all these poems to say, look how big my brain is. You should give me money, Queen.
Okay, well, there you are. I learned something about the word clout, too. Maybe that's something to do with the etymology.
Important things, though, before you read the poem. Just keep in mind, the eclogue is about nature, about philosophy. They're about dialogues that don't really go anywhere.
You mean like Infobores?
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that, I got criticized the other day that you and I don't seem to go anywhere in our conversations. And I kind of gave the guy a hard time. I was like, well, what did you want?
I will point out that is a true critique. This poem is about reading a poem. We have yet to read it, and we're almost halfway through the episode.
All right, well said. Okay, so we are going to read this poem, Eclogue by John Ashbery.
And it's a dialogue, so...
And which one of us is playing the role of Cuddy?
You are going to be playing the role of Cuddy. I'm going to be playing the role of Colin Clout.
So you are Colin Clout. Are you like a pseudonym for John Ashbery then?
That's something we can discuss.
Oh, okay. So should we go ahead and read this?
Yep.
Okay, so this is Eclogue, and it's from an album entitled Some Trees.
Album?
I'm sorry, my musical training.
Collection.
What do you call them?
Poetry collection.
Okay. It's Eclogue from a poetry collection called Some Trees that was first published in 1956 by John Ashbery.
Well, this one might have been published sooner.
Should I read the name first? Or...
Oh, no. Just know, you're Cuddy.
Oh, if you hear my voice, I'm Cuddy. Oh, boy.
We've already explained this. Just go.
And if you hear his voice, he is Colin...
Clout.
Got it.
All right, sorry.
All right. Slowly all your secret is had. In the empty day, people and sticks go down to the water. How can we be so silent? Only shivers are bred in this land of whistling goats.
Father, I have long dreamed your whitened face and sides to accost me in dull play. If you in your bush indeed know her, where shall my heart's vagrant tides place her?
A wish is induced by a sudden change in the wind's decay. Shall we to the water's edge, O prince? The peons rant in a light fume. Madness will gaze at its reflection.
Was this pain come near me? Now I thought my heart would burst, and there, spiked like some cadenza's head, a tiny crippled heart was born.
I tell you, good will imitate this. Now we must dip in raw water these few thoughts and fleshy members, so evil may refresh our days.
She has descended part way. Now, Father, cut me down with tears, plant me far in my mother's image, to do cold work of books and stones.
I need not raise my hand.
She burns the flying peoples,
to hear its old advice,
and spears my heart's two beasts,
or cover with its mauves.
And I depart unhurt.
How'd we do in our reading?
I thought we did quite well. But what do you think of the poem?
There's a few things in here. Okay, now, I will confess, listener, this is the first time I have read through this poem.
Which is funny, because you actually have read before.
Had I already read this one?
It's the third poem in the collection.
Oh, I had read this one. Wow. Oh, that's really embarrassing. Should I go back and take that out?
No, you're good.
Okay, well, that tells you it's memorable.
No, it tells you that in your initial response, you thought, this makes no sense.
Maybe
and
I just
sort of
pushed
flipped
on.
over it.
Okay.